removed because the interview took place in executive session.
Personnel issues can only be discussed in executive session.
For the record, and I think anyone that knows what is discussed in executive session cannot be discussed with anybody.
That is not true.
That is not true.
As per our legal counsel.
Okay, we're here with Roma School Board President Clarissa Alvarez. Can you tell me, Clarissa, what your experience was in the beginning when you first started?
Yes, Social. One thing that's been lingering in my mind lately, and I guess I just hadn't really paid attention to, I guess, myself and my reasons for being on the board, trying to serve as I have been doing for the last few years. My question lately has been that originally I was asked to run by Leti Garza Galvan in January of 2015. I told her straight off that I'd have to consult with my family and my friends and see if there was something I wanted to do. I'd never, and I still don't consider myself a politician.
Did you have an idea more or less? Did you know somebody that was a member that you could kind of say, oh, I kind of knew what I was getting myself into?
Well, I know Raul, Tony, and Dago were there. Mr. Arturo Perez was there. I thought it'd be something because I truly like to help. Like I had been helping in Little League for several years prior to this. When she asked me, she called me. It was I believe it was the first week of January in 2015. I thought it'd be something I'd want to try, but I needed to talk to my family first.
When she called you, what did she tell you was the reason that she chose you?
I asked her, why me? And at the time she said she was the only female on the board, that she needed help, that she didn't understand some numbers. I was surprised to hear that from her. I didn't know her to the extent to what her knowledge was or what she'd do for a living or anything like that. It made me feel good thinking they were asking for my help. That's the way I took it. I consult with my husband, my mother, my brothers, my co-workers, my employer, Mr. Salinas, and I did speak to several board members from the bank that I work in to make sure that they didn't feel it'd be jeopardizing my job, because my job is a priority. Everything else, of course, it's God, my family, my job, and everything else is next to that. I wanted to feel what these people, the people that I believe I would have the support from, what their input was. And they all agreed that it'd be a good idea for me to give it a shot.
What is your specialty? What do you do in the bank?
Currently, I am a vice president, a cashier, senior vice president. I oversee different departments.
So you wear a lot of hats in the bank.
I sure do.
I guess from the sound of it, she kind of saw your experience as being the value in drawing you into the board.
I would think so, because then I did find out that, from what I understand, my name had been mentioned. Okay, about maybe me being asked to run for some kind of elected position.
So this is 2015. Who ran against you?
At the time, estaba corriendo, and excuse my being bilingual here, but that year it was myself, Arturo Perez, and Rey Rodriguez against Clyde Guerra, Romeo Gonzalez, and I think that was it.
And so we're back in 2015. You became a school board member. What were the first things that you saw that surprised you?
The very first thing that I saw was when I would receive the packages, the board packages, I couldn't make much sense of it. So I started asking questions. I think that was sign number one.
So you saw numbers, you saw something in the numbers that just didn't fit.
Right. I was elected with the support of the community members or the voters from Roma ISD, which I'm thankful for. And I was sworn in November of 2015. In December of 2015, I saw some numbers, like I say, that to me didn't make sense. I was still too new. I really didn't understand what was going on, didn't have the confidence to be asking a whole lot of questions. But then come January, I see numbers again, and I start asking questions. And that night, after the meeting, I received a text message that stated that I needed to be careful how I would ask questions.
What does that mean?
To me, at the time, I figured I was supposed to be quiet.
And how did you react to that?
Not good. I picked up the phone and I called, but my response was, no, I don't need to be careful how I ask questions. We need to be careful who we hire as vendors, because the money going out from the school district is not our personal money. It's the taxpayers' money. And I felt I had been elected to protect that money.
But is it asking questions like the heart and soul of transparency?
Should be.
Basically, what you're telling me, what I'm getting from this, is that you walked in there and from day one you saw things and you were so transparent that you set off alarms in people that were doing the wrong thing.
Obviously.
Okay.
Because I still don't understand why the same people that asked me to run in 2015 went against me and tried to not get me reelected in 2018 to the day. I've never asked anybody, but to the day that confuses me.
And who did they set up to run against you in 2018?
Miss Amalia Yunes. An excellent woman. I have nothing against her. I found it odd that they'd want to get anybody, whoever it may be, to run against me.
So they ask you, well, you're running in 2015, and then they turn around and you're asking questions, being transparent, and that was unacceptable. So rather than get behind you in 2018, they decided to put someone to run against you. Why would they want to replace you if you're being transparent?
Perhaps somebody didn't understand what transparency was or doesn't like transparency, maybe. That's what I could think. And prior to me knowing that Ms. Eunice was going to be running against me, let me backtrack a few months, I guess, is I reached out to who I thought would be on my slate for 2018, which was Mr. Ray Rodriguez. Since we had run together in 2015, I reached out to him a Friday night, and that I do have a text to, where I asked him, hey, Ray, are you planning to run? Automatically, he answered yes. Instantly. And I said, oh, okay, well, good. And I said, so who's running against who? What are we doing? Because by this time, we were already running by places. The first time, we were not running by places. It was just the top vote getters. By the second time that I ran in 2018, now it was going to be by places. So he said he didn't know who was running or who not, but he did tell me in that text message that he needed to talk to the Peñas. And he mentioned by name Bernice and Fernando. And I said, okay, and why do you think you need to reach out to them? And I quote, he says, porque no tengo colmillo para correr esto. Whatever that means.
Okay.
I really don't know what that means.
So in your experience in 2015, you dealt with leche.
To a certain extent, yes.
Were you ever approached or did you ever sit down with Bernice and Fernando?
No.
What was the campaigning like?
Campaigning that I can recall, it was other than the burger drives, I think we had a bingo, little things like that. I don't remember walking. I remember doing a lot of legwork, putting up the signs. Okay. That I remember. But by that, it was my family and myself. Ray would sometimes show up. Mr. Perez would go with us as well. But we were out there and there was some workers. I really don't know some of those people. I didn't. We did a lot of lit work. My family, my sons, my husband, myself, and some of the supporters. We went out there putting up signs ourselves.
If you don't mind my asking, how much did you put out of your pocket for the campaign?
$0.
$0.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was never asked for a single cent.
So who was paying out for all?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Is it fair to say that they invited you in and that they paid for all of the campaign?
Pretty much.
We're kind of led to believe that they're just wealthy by nature, that they have wealth, and that they use this wealth for political reasons. And then you come in 2015, you identified something wrong, you start asking questions, and then what happened?
Again, I start seeing things that I just couldn't make sense of. I try to see myself. I do research on TEA, which I've got some here. You may want, and it's straight from TEA. There's nothing wrong. Anybody can go in there and research this information.
Point out like the most interesting things that you remember.
The first thing I saw was the expenditures, the fund balance. Back in 2011, the school year 2011-2012, the school had a fund balance of $33 million, which 2012 and 2013 increased to $36 million.
Okay.
Then 2013 comes around. There's an election. That was prior to my days. And the fund balance decreased $3 million.
So we saw an increase and then a decrease of $3 million,
Right.
where we had a pattern of it increasing all
Exactly.
along.
During 2011 and 2012, I believe Mr. Arturo Perez was the president at the time. So obviously things were going well here. Fund balance 33 million, 36 million. Then there's an election and different presidency comes about, which we know who the president was prior to Raul Moreno and prior to me. School year 2013-2014, fund balance of $33 million. It decreases.
Okay.
And they may argue, yeah, we built this, we built that, and we did this, and we did that. And I pushed because I did for a bond. And sorry for my ignorance at the time. I really didn't know how those monies were going to be spent, which has nothing to do with the fund balance. But the fund balance decreased 3 million to 33 million. 2014, 2015, another 3 million decreased, $30 million. And then 2015-16, it dropped to 25 million.
Wow.
Those were the things. Remember, 2015 is when I came in, November 2015. So at the end of the school year, we get the financial audit. And again, I go into TEA, I see what's going on. I'm confused. And again, I ask questions, which I, at the time, wasn't told, but I can read between the lines and I wasn't supposed to ask.
At what point did the bond kick in that you pushed for?
That was in I believe it was May of 2015. I was still not on the board.
And how much was that bond?
That bond was $25 million, which was for the construction of what now is DGG here in La Rosita, to do the JROTC building, which is in the process and hopefully to get started in August. It was for what else? It was going to be used in multiple projects.
Now, from what I'm understanding, these people are building everywhere. They're in control of everything. You come in, they're pushing for a bond, and it gets pushed through. They had the majority at the time. Even if you would have said no, they still would have gotten it. And you're starting to look at these things. At what point do you realize that these people are not exactly working in the best interest? Was it when you saw such a huge decline in the fund, in the general?
Was early 2016.
Okay.
When I started doing my own research. Early 2016, and this is where, believe it or not, and people are probably going to criticize and say, why didn't you do anything before? But I was afraid to be part of this decrease. But in my nature, I've never, ever had anybody, and I will never accept anybody telling me what to do, when to do it, or how to do it.
Is that what happened?
I believe so, because I wasn't having to go to anybody there straight off to ask what's going on. I did my own research.
So this is information that if you wouldn't have gone after it on your own, you would have never found out about.
Not really.
And this is born out of your experience of working in the bank.
Definitely.
It's kind of difficult to imagine people with other backgrounds, not to say that the whole board needs to be full of bankers, but to at least have a presence of someone like you in there that is kind of going through these reports with a fine-tooth comb. There's no security in place that would have set up some red flags, auditors.
Oh, of course, there's your annual audits. But everything, I mean, obviously it was being spent as to what they believe. I mean, it wasn't like somebody was just making a check and putting it into their pocket. I don't believe that's what was happening.
But it's really
it was
close to it.
Well, there was a very big red flag as to the decrease. $3 million every year. And that is why I went back to 2010, 2011, 2012 to see what the pattern was. So I figured, well, maybe that's something normal, that there should be a decrease of a few $1 million every year, but that pattern wasn't there.
Well, that's not the way I look at it when I look at what's going on with the whole drainage thing. And I see Fernando's on the zoning committee. I see the people that sold the properties being the people that are at the forefront of trying to get money to help fix the problem that as developers they should have fixed in the first place. And I see that the whole game is rigged. In my head, the auditor's in on it. Everybody's in on it. We've interacted with these people as human beings. And it's not like we walk into a place and I start thinking, oh, something's wrong with Letty. She's this big old thief or whatever. So there is a point where I look at her outside of the whole conspiracy theory. How is it from the perspective of some of the other members that are now behind you as a majority?
Well, that's the thing, because I've spoken to several of them, because I, again, like I say, say. I was confused at the beginning. I figured this is something normal, and perhaps it may be. I just wasn't, I was not happy seeing that, again, just like yours and mine and anybody living within the school district, this is taxpayer money. I didn't feel comfortable with and maybe because of the nature of my job. I'm not there to take anybody's money. God forbid I take a cent that doesn't belong to me. I've been in banking for nearly 30 years, and if it doesn't balance to the penny, something is off.
I know Letty was also the president around that time, wasn't she?
Correct.
Do you suppose that maybe her leadership was so strong that she would just kind of tell people what enough for them to accept it and move on and think this is a good thing, but then find out later that it was actually something that was not what was sold to them?
I can only speak my opinion. I don't know what these people were thinking or seeing or feeling or what it was, but I can safely say there may have been intimidation. There may have been possible retaliation if things weren't getting done the way they were asked to be done, which again, that is not in my nature.
Did you see any direct acts of retaliation?
That was another thing, and that I don't have here with me, but it's also on TEA information that around these same days or these years that those decreases were happening, increases in employment was happening, which I didn't understand as well, because on TEA's website is also the total enrollment of students per year, and that was decreasing.
I believe that what I'm looking into right now is the same pattern in Rio Grande City.
It could be.
So we have a decrease in dollar amounts. We have a decrease in enrollment.
Increase in expenditures.
Increase in expenditures, and some people were getting raises, some people weren't. Some people might have been afraid of losing their jobs. I personally know from working with the Better Public Servant inbox that some people were afraid to speak out.
I honestly believe, and to the day, I still believe that's happening. And I've had people come in and ask me and tell me, and maybe they feel comfortable, and I will never bring their names out when they come and talk to me and things like that. But I've always said that any employee, regardless of where they work, have the right to ask. And that's my goal. That's one thing that I've said. There's people out there trying to inform the community. My goal is to have people not feel intimidated, to ask questions, especially if you as an individual, as a taxpayer, are paying your duties. Why can you not ask, where is my money going?
Because it's real. I still look at them and I think until they lose, people don't feel comfortable, and it's always going to linger. It's always going to hang around. When I first asked you if you would do this interview, we have to look back to how many years. When was the last time you heard a politician in Starr County or someone, an elected public servant, when was the last time you heard them sit down and have a conversation with the taxpayers?
Okay.
The dialogue is changing because they control that too, and it's been one-sided. What I've tried to do over the span of 5 years is just try to make an environment available to have a dialogue, and here we are, we're sitting down. I can disagree with you. We're not going to start getting stupid or violent.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm a firm believer. I consider myself, I've been a manager for many years. I consider myself to be a team player. I'm part of the group as long as that game is being played correctly and by the rules.
Do you expect them getting a little bit more aggressive in the following election? From what I've seen, they're having such a hard time selling G. Allen to Starr County. I just fear that they're going to start getting uglier and uglier.
It probably will, because like I said, I was there. Of course, I didn't see it like that because I was part of that group. So it was all good. And I'm sure once this goes out there and it's aired, and people are going to start, especially people from that group, are going to start sending inboxes as they've been doing, because they've told me. I've got people that they send messages to and trying to confuse them. And Mr. Fernando Peña said it in one of the videos you posted. Los políticos quieren confundir a la gente. He said it. He quoted it.
They are notorious for accusing other people of doing the very thing that they do. I've noticed that.
And at that point, when I said, and I shared your video, because I love what you're doing and continue doing it. I quoted, que no entienden. I quoted Joel Hinojosa, vamos a buscar fondos.
Yes.
Okay. And that was the reason I shared that video, that I received messages from multiple people, good, bad, you name it, it was there. And that's fine, because like I've said it and I'll say it again. If I'm going to speak something, it's because I'm speaking the truth. I am not going to lie, and I am not going to confuse anybody, and I will not get confused because I am speaking the truth.
I think that 5 years ago, they were somewhat kind of new as a political group coming into it, or maybe a few more years back. And they had a way of just using emotions and feelings to kind of get people to say, trust me, this is good, they're bad. And it was just small information and tidbits and sound bites, misleading or whatnot. So much has happened that we can look back, and we have them on video, we have them in their posts, their own words kind of give away. You have this paperwork that tells its own story, and the black and white and the numbers, it's very difficult to accuse them of lying. And now they're kind of surfacing up and they're telling the story, and they don't know how to handle it. They're still trying to use emotions. When you were a part of it, was that something that you saw that you thought, well, maybe the rhetoric should be a little bit more focused on other things?
These were not things that I was seeing straight off. During my campaign, there was the issue of Letty, that she had been accused of stealing at Macy's or something of that sort. She didn't show up one of those days to the camp. I remember texting her, or maybe Bernice said something, no, she's feeling very down because of what's going on. And I felt for her.
Did you believe what they were saying?
I believed her story when she texted me that it was a mistake.
And she put out there a lot of information. I mean,
Yes,
legally, it's gone. It's disappeared. I mean, at least that's the impression that we're given. But the fact remains that that was done. A lot of people didn't know about Joel. And then it comes out and it kind of changes everything when here he is criticizing someone who's a formerly convicted felon. And then he comes out that he's been hiding the fact. I've never hidden the fact from anybody.
And I'm sure I will be criticized. I've got family members that have served, that have been in jail as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. They served their time. They did wrong. They learn and they move on. But trying to deny it or hide it, like you said,
were you a part or were you there for those defect lawsuits?
that's when I came into the board.
So
That was ongoing when I went onto the board. And again, pardon my ignorance, there wasn't a whole lot of things that I asked at the time, of which I am making plenty of questions now with pending lawsuits.
I consider myself to be a pretty smart guy when I want to be. I sit down, I put on my thinking cap, I read things slow, I look at things slow, and understanding the possibilities during those cases for me was straining. And I look at the appeals and I'm listening to the contractors basically say the school board created this problem. And the school board, I look at them thinking to themselves, we're a government entity, no one can sue us, we're going to do this anyway. And then the judgment comes back and Jose Luis Garza was right for saying it because somebody else checked it higher up, and it's now being used as a model. For example, the port in Houston who tried to use the same excuses not to get sued, and they cited that case in Roma ISD. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I was corrupt and I had the ability to create problems like that and I had the lawyers in my pocket, I just see a lot of opportunity to say, look, contractor, this is what's going to happen. I'm not going to pay you and you're going to fix it. He's going to get angry. He's going to sue. Then I turn around and tell my lawyer buddy, are you ready? Because the lawsuit is coming. So make sure that when the money comes in, you give me my cut. And then the lawyer says, okay, are you ready? Because campaign is coming. And we need that, those signs to go up. And I tell you, yeah, we got everything. And I understand that politiqueras, you got kind of like the good politiquera and the bad politiquera. And they have rules and they have laws. And you need these people to go out there because they're the people that do a lot of the footwork. But what I'm looking on this is just corruption in everything. You have a checklist of do it the wrong way. And it's almost like they're just looking at people going, oh, nobody knows what we're doing anyway. Let's just go ahead and break every law.
And the few that do know shouldn't say anything, and they're right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That goes back to the whole trust thing. Can we trust this person?
Loyalty. That reminds me of one thing that after I won the election, or I was elected back in 2015, after all that happened, I heard from a very trustworthy person say that at one time, Letty had questioned, but I believe it 1,000%, that one of her questions was if I would be loyal.
When you look at Ramiro, when you look at Ramiro Guillen and Joel Hinojosa and the devotion that they have.
Oh, now that you mention that, Ramiro Guillen called me one day and called several board members. It was a Saturday that he wanted to go visit us at our houses. And he made appointments. He went to my house. I was a 3:00 appointment on a Saturday, and it was late 2016. And his questions was, and just like I'm showing you the TEA reports here that are public to anybody who wants to see them, he went, and I was ready. And he tells me, Gladys, why can't you get along with Letty?
Oh.
Yes. He did. And I said, really, Ramiro? He says, I know she can be stubborn. She's hard-headed, which she's posted publicly. Then she realizes she's that. Le dije, Ramiro, and why do you want me to even try to talk to her? If you've known her longer than I have and haven't been able to do that, why do you think I'd want to lose time? I value my time. Why do you want me to talk to her? You're one of her friends, better friends, maybe best friend, and most definitely a cheerleader for her. That was the time that the song, something about being a cheerleader, there's a song going on. Yes, le dije, that fits you perfect. And he said, yeah, well, I guess you're right. He was there at my house maybe 20, 30 minutes, it was a useless conversation on there. I don't know, he was trying maybe to convince me también to talk to her, to show loyalty, like they believe whatever that means to them, loyalty. But it was a very unsuccessful conversation, a waste of my time when he went to my house. Maybe he was just fishing.
Maybe they just really didn't understand it or didn't get it, that you actually had a connection with saving taxpayer money. It's something that they didn't understand. So obviously there has to be some other reason. And he was there to ask you to see if maybe you would confide in him and maybe he could bridge that gap.
I'd feel insulted if he was to think that I'd be able to just, because it's you, Ramiro, and I should do whatever you think I want me to do.
But that's what they run their whole campaigns on. It's me, you can trust me. And then all of this comes out and they're still doing it today. They're still saying, don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about.
They're haters.
They're haters. Ignore the paperwork. Ignore the videos. Ignore that it's us saying those things and just believe us. That's how they run their campaigns. I don't understand. Ramiro, the cheerleader, he goes to everyone's houses.
He wants me to confide in him or fishing, or I don't know what he was trying to do.
Going back to the defects cases, because there was quite a bit of construction during your time, right?
Yes.
How did that play out?
I voted, I'm talking about the DGG elementary number 7, that it took a long time for us to decide what we wanted to do because if I remember correctly, the bond that had been passed for $25 million, that I believe 13 million or 14 million of that was supposed to be for the construction of DGG. And this took about maybe a year and a half by the time we were able to decide on the designs and things like that. So of course, prices went up, everything went up. So 14 million wasn't going to cut it to construct that elementary. Okay. I voted against it. And again, it's public records and they will turn things around because they have that I'm a negative person and I don't want to better the students. That is not a fact. My whole point was that, we had the bond. We could fix what we had. We knew we were going to spend $3.1 or $3.2 million to play with dirt in that construction site in La Rosita because of that it was stone and it was very unleveled and they needed to do I don't know what and studies and on and on and on. $3.some million.
What you're trying to say is that it was a very excessive amount of money to prepare the infrastructure.
The site for the construction. Okay. I figured we could probably even tear down what was and rebuilt there.
And how much do you think it would have
They had given us numbers. They had, because we tried everything, but again, at that time I was minority on the board.
Right. No, and they have a way of saying, this is the best. They don't show how they arrive at it, but they do say, well, don't you want the best lawyers on this? And I'm thinking to myself, how do you judge that? Do they have like a bar exam for the bar exam? And it's like, what are you basing it on, their grades? Who has gotten the most convictions? Who has gotten the most crooks off of the case? How do you decide these are the best infrastructure builders?
It was tough. For 2 different occasions during my time, 2016 and 17, I was ready to give up on the board. I wanted to resign. I really did.
Wow.
Because it was tough. And it is tough being a minority of a group that I considered being part of.
I can imagine that that's very frustrating.
It was. It got to a point to where, like I said twice, I was ready to give up and just throw in the towel and call it quits, because I could see how much we could do, how much we could better the district, and which we have. And not necessarily by building buildings, but we've all seen what Mr. Guzman has done, what the administration has done. When I ran in 2018, my whole campaign was about giving the school back to the administration, to the students, to the educators. What do I know about running a schoolroom,
Right.
a classroom? I'm a banker. I'm not a teacher. I'm not an educator.
Right. The trick is really doing it in the future. Hindsight is 2020. You're looking at what's going on in Rio, I assume. What advice would you have for the people in Rio? Or if you could put on your little like prophet hat, what do you see coming down the pipe? Because these are the same people that have strings attached to Eleazar Velasquez, Dr. B, Leti Lopez has joined them, and who's the number 4? Danny Garcia.
Danny.
And people are watching what they're doing, and they're very confused. As I imagine, a lot of people during this time were somewhat confused, but it was kept quiet. They weren't out there. They weren't transparent. They weren't telling people, hey, these are the bids that we got, and this is why we went with this guy. I would look at the meetings, I remember. There wasn't a whole lot of information coming out.
No, I mean, the only advice I have, and again, this is just advice, and I don't mean for anybody to take it in any way or thing. I mean, you're asking me, I'm saying they're professionals, they're attorneys, they're doctors, I'm not sure what the other people do that are there on the board, but stick to your profession. Do what you were elected for, which is take care of the school budget. Check to see that the superintendent that should be capable of running the school, that is fully qualified to run a school.
But right from the start, I mean, from a business perspective, you've got somebody making what, 86,000 or 100, and then that gets jacked up to 200 and something thousand. I don't see the business sense in that.
I don't either, but them being attorneys, and most of them, or whoever is an attorney there, I know but they run their own business. They should know a little bit about business, and those numbers just it doesn't work like that.
We have different experiences with attorneys, because what I know about attorneys is they got people that do everything for them. But even
somebody's got to be telling them where their money's going. They've got to understand that.
I don't even think they could find their own pants without somebody giving it to them sometimes in some cases. But when I see them, it's like I want to tell them, hey, you guys are lagging behind so many years in Roma, and they're pulling tricks that they did in Roma. That's kind of the way I see it.
It could be. Of course, these are my hopes that every school district, I mean, yes, we're elected, hopefully for the right reasons by the voters, and to do the right thing, to protect the taxpayer money, to make sure the money's being spent the way it should, making sure the superintendent is doing his job, not the classroom teacher, not the principal. That's the superintendent's job.
I get you.
Not ours.
Right.
Not the board members.
So what you're saying is keep your hands out of the hiring and the firing of the teachers and stuff. Stop using them to muscle in on votes, et cetera, et cetera. And you are now the president. There was a point where you were getting ready to say, I'm out of here. You've got the construction cases. You've got all of this. What clicked in your head and led to you becoming the president?
When I won the election, or my re-election in 2018, it was put onto the agenda, board reorganization. And obviously the nomination was there for me to be a president. I thought about it, and I figured if somebody else has been able to do it, why can't I? I'll give it a shot. I was ready to call it quits. I'm not a quitter. I am not a quitter, but I was very close to quitting because it was very frustrating.
It was an uphill battle. I mean, from your perspective.
But when I saw the other board members who obviously had trust and faith in me and had seen that I was not going to keep quiet, that I was going to question, perhaps they saw things that were being done in the right way and should be, they made the nomination for me to be president. So I felt I can go ahead and do it. And I felt also that if they felt that I wasn't doing a good job as president, they'd call a reorganization again, which they can at any point.
Would you say they had a sort of moral awakening?
I believe so. And perhaps, I don't know if it was hard that there was only one female on the board, and maybe the attitude of that female prior to me coming in, and I don't want to make make it a male and female dispute or anything, but I would assume maybe some of the guys or the males maybe didn't want to say anything because maybe she just pout or
she
kick
does
her
the
leg.
bleeding heart act like Mother Teresa on drugs.
Or
I
something
mean,
like that. And maybe they felt, oh, just let it be. Now, there was 2 females, and if they feel, which I believe they believe, and that I've been doing okay as a school board president, which to the day, I'll say I'm a board member. I don't refer myself to the president. Because, like I've said before, I am the school board president, but that doesn't make me, or that does not give me any more power compared to the others, because I am just one person and the president doesn't make decisions on her own.
are we looking at maybe a case of emotional abuse where a person uses the victim card a little too much?
Oh yeah, I've posted many posts. If anybody can go into my Facebook page and see where a narcissist, I don't know what other words I've put on there, to where it's just senile, where they keep practicing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result.
Oh, that's insanity.
Insanity. And a narcissist also, I mean, lie after lie after lie, and then become a victim because the truth is here. So it's like, I don't know. I often believe, obviously, I don't know if all these behaviors are, I think they are. It's an illness. And that maybe help needs to be sought or something. I don't know.
I see it as a very immature way for certain people. I mean, even the cheerleading. Recently, I watched Joel as a councilman talking to Crisanto about the possibility. What if the insurance company does not make an offer? And I watched Crisanto just keep it together. And I see that it's something that comes with age. The discipline that Mr. Bobby Salinas displays in Crisanto, that's something that you get with age and experience. And he's just kind of trying to respond in a manner where it's a bit unfair for Joel to be doing that, because it's almost like he's tempting them. I mean, it would have frustrated me up and down. And the example that rings out is that Crisanto example, because there's no other way that I can see him handling. He can't get upset. He can't really get into the argument of it, because Joel's just going to keep repeating the same thing over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And the campaigning is no different. You can't basically engage with them in any real, and I welcome it. I want them to come and sit down with me. These are high school friends of mine. I want them to come and sit down and let's just have a conversation.
And now that you mentioned that, our school board meetings are aired on the Roma ISD page, on GTN and all that. And there's been times that there's argument like that. And let me be straightforward, because it's on video. It's on there. It's not a lie. Where she just wants to give opposition always, and then she ends up voting for it. So that's another behavior I just don't understand.
What do you mean?
When there's an agenda item, I can't think of one right now off the top of my head. I'd have to go off to Agenda X. And we believe that's the right thing to do, and we want to do this. And she's going to turn things around and say, well, I proposed that I don't know how many years ago, and it didn't go through. Why now? And no, it shouldn't, and on and on and on. And then she makes the motion.
Huh. She instigates it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't want it. But hey, I'll be the first to start it.
Yes.
I'm not even gonna go there, because I could basically just look at it and say, well, I don't like it because I haven't talked to people that are in there talking about giving me a kickback yet. So I'm not ready to do it yet. And then it clicks in my head. Oh wait, I remember this guy sells that. Yeah, I'll motion it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting being there on the board. It's a challenge, like I've said before. I'd love to continue serving as long as I can for the right reasons, doing the right things for our district, continue seeing it become what it has become, and of course continue improving in every way that it possibly can. We'll see what the next election brings, and November of 2020, see how that goes. I believe she'll be up for re-election, and Tony and Raul Endago as well. We'll see how that goes, and God help us.
From your memory, is there anything that you could think off the top of your head that you say, well, you might find it interesting when you look at this?
Other than that was another thing when that we put it into vote to start the construction on the DGG Elementary. That again, and I need to clear that up. I didn't finish that I voted against it, and not because we didn't want a school or I didn't want a school. I believe it was me and 2 others that voted against. It was again for the wrong reasons. We didn't feel it was a time to do it, especially knowing what was going to be spent in playing with the dirt, which also was in that meeting. But I do remember the contractor was present. It was approved and everything everything. And then they started mentioning on who was going to be hired for the playing of the dirt. And he mentioned several companies, which at that time he mentioned he was going to be hiring Hawk Oil Field Services out of Zapata, I believe, being that there was a construction company there that he had worked with before. So I questioned it and I said, and why are you going with that company and not somebody you know who has done the work for you or you know how they work? His answer was something about the equipment, that company would lease the equipment, that they didn't own it.
What did that have to do with anything?
That if it would break down, they could just go get a new one and not take up any more time.
Okay.
That was it. And perhaps that makes sense. I'm not a construction person or anything like that. I just found it very odd.
It has its value. Some guys that own their own equipment, it breaks down. It's going to take them a longer time. But if they have a contract, and especially one paying the amount that you did, they could buy the equipment. And not even like worry about fixing it. What I'm looking at is that they didn't bid out for this work. They just said, these are the guys we're going to use.
I don't know if the construction company, actually did that because it was already on them. I mean, we just hire the contractors and they do their thing. I'm sure it did because I remember them presenting a list to us, which was, I think, 4 or 5 different companies.
Okay.
Yeah, and that company out of Zapata, it wasn't the highest, it wasn't the lowest. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was what caught my eye that it was out of Zapata and he had never worked with.
And I see that happening. I see that as a selling point. I'm from that transportation industry, and that is a selling point that is often used.
So I don't know exactly what was going on there. And like you said, I mean, I'm not a construction person. It could have been, but that was one thing that did catch my eye. And then we finally closed out that this past month here or maybe in May. There was some issues with that company as well. They had to redo whatever they had to redo with the pavement because I believe they did not have the expertise in doing what they did. So they ended up taking everything off and putting it up again, which I believe it was finally completed in I think it was maybe June, mid-June.
So you have, what is it that drew your attention to question this company in the first place?
That they were out of Zapata. He mentioned the companies he had worked with, and that was not one of those.
Okay, so you got a new company, somebody that you never worked with, and then they go down and they start moving this dirt around. And some of us from around here know that it was pushed into the next lot and that it was picked up and it was taken over to Fernando's property. And that's just what I heard on the grapevine, but ask around and you're going to get the same thing.
Right. And I believe there was comments on Facebook about that, which again, I don't know if it did or did not happen, if it's facts or not, but I did read about it on Facebook, things like that. I do remember questioning the project, our local project person, I believe it was Edgar Rodriguez there with the school, as to who did that dirt belong to when it was going to be moved out. Was it on the contract? Did it say on the contract that was dirt that belonged to the school, or they throw it, or what? I don't remember ever getting an answer.
And I look at that information and by itself, and it's like, it's just a rumor, okay. But then I start seeing Fernando talk about how badly he wants the dirt in the courtroom, and I start thinking, hold on a second, he's putting that much value to the dirt, then there's probably a higher chance that he actually did that. And so you've got somebody working out of Zapata. It would be convenient to, where were they originally going to take that dirt in the first place?
I never asked. I don't know if any of the other members ever asked. I know I didn't because, again, that's not my nature. I just knew they were going to start building. They needed to clear the place. I guess another thing that caught my attention is that the contractor was out of Edinburgh, out of Edinburgh, and then hiring where the other companies were out of the valley hiring a Zapata company.
So the contractor's out in Hidalgo. They hire the Zapata. You got a jacked up amount in transportation. They moved the dirt. It only went from like 3 or 4 miles. You have this overinflated price. There's a lot of room for money just to slip from one hand to the other because you're not paying that much to move the dirt. You could have done it a lot cheaper using different methods, different ways, but instead you have 3.1 or 3.4
$3.4
million to move dirt dirt. And from the grapevine and Fernando's obvious love of dirt would have moved it 3-4 miles. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. It would have been cheaper. If that was the case, we could have given him the dirt and saved money.
And the reason I asked what we were supposed to do with that dirt, if it was mentioned on the contract or not, is because I personally got calls from people, local people, that if I knew that was good dirt to me, and again, excuse my ignorance, dirt is dirt. But I was told it was caliche and that it was good and it was a value, and that there was people, I had maybe 2 or 3 people call me that they were interested in buying the dirt from the school.
So you could have made up. You could
there's
have made
more money for the school, for
Wow.
our students. And that's when I called the school so that they could check, and I told them to get in contact with those people that were contacting me, because I didn't know exactly what needed to be done or anything. I do not know the outcome of that, but I do know that the dirt was not sold.
Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's say that Fernando didn't do that. Let's just say that they picked up the dirt and they took it away from there. Why allow the opportunity to make some of that money back on that construction from the dirt itself to slip by? Is she just stupid or ignorant, or does she just not understand business whatsoever?
I wouldn't be able to answer that. If she did ask me to run and hopefully win the first time because she needed help understanding numbers,
It makes sense now. It makes perfectly good sense. So she thought, okay, I'm going to bring this person in to maybe fandangle the numbers a little bit.
could be.
And then it just turns out that you have a moral compass. You're not a rat. And you sit down on the chair. You believe and you take the oath. And you look at the taxpayers that you have lunch with every time you go down to the restaurants and to church and to the events and to the Little Leagues. And you're looking in their eyes and you think to yourself, no, I can't steal from these people. It doesn't stop them from doing it. It doesn't stop them from going on social media and delivering the message to thousands of people over and over again like we're idiots. Because I don't even look at half of this information that you're showing me here. And I'm sitting down thinking to myself, okay, now this is happening. I look at just what Fernando said. It's his character. We've known him for how long? I worked for the man when I was in high school. He was one of the first bosses that I had. And I was taken behind the curtain. And, it's hilarious because I look at this now and I think to myself, now I understand some of the things that I saw back then.
And it makes us feel, or at least me, it makes me feel, I don't know, that maybe we were supposed to have known these things, but we didn't. I didn't. I feel offended that they would have thought that I would go along, and again, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but that I would go along, or that I blind myself and not question whenever I thought something was wrong.
Well, the way I kind of felt at times is like someone was going to say, okay, he figured it out, but they don't. It becomes like that hate. It becomes a punishment. Oh, you figured it out. Prepare yourself, because we're about to go on a hate campaign on you.
Yeah.
It's in everything, and it's spread like a cancer, like a disease. I was angry at Mr. Eloy Vera at some point.
I was too.
And I look back at the 2018 election and I saw Letty running against him. I was not that angry with him. I could not take it out on the taxpayers. And I'm glad that he won. And I sat down and I thanked him for winning, because at his age, it's getting harder to keep going. And I look at him displaying the same amount of that aged discipline when you have action now basically saying, could you do this, or in that arrogant tone. And for him to just say, I'd like to, but I'm afraid that it would compromise the work that we're doing right now. And I look at it and I think to myself, oh my, for the first time, the incumbents need protection. We're so used to saying, everybody's corrupt, everybody's corrupt, get them all out. But then we're looking at him, we're thinking, no, the guys coming in are a bigger threat. I mean, I think that we're beginning to paint this picture. You've gone a long way and I want to thank you. This, to me, is a step in the right direction. And I'm hoping to get more people to come in and talk from both sides. I know that I may sound a little rough around the edges and I joke around a lot, and a lot of people don't know that some of the stuff that looks serious on Facebook that I might say, it's just me horsing around. I invite guys like Hervé to come and sit down and let's have a conversation. The only thing you have to fear is that logic is going to dominate the conversation and you're going to find yourself having to confess. And that's the most frightening thing that I think they're afraid of.
Yeah. I know I invited Hervé myself after I shared your post that he was a little offended. And I did get to meet with him yesterday. He was enlightened by some of the things that just like I've mentioned here. I'm sure if I did tell him, go talk to us yet. And I hope he does decide to come. And I believe that the day that you offered to talk to him, it was maybe midnight or something. But it'd be nice for you all to talk as well.
I extended it. I told him, hey, just let me know whenever you're ready, and you know, I'll make myself available. And I'm hoping that I get Gocha to come and sit down with me at some point. I know that we have a lot of personal stuff, and I keep telling him not to go into that area. I know too much about him. Just to sit down, even in this, to me, it seems like he's taking this abstract idea of what justice is and trying to use it like if it's something that is physical that you can hold. I've read Plato. I've read The Republic. They didn't get it back then 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years later, we're still trying to figure it out. But he seems to have, his finger on it. Yeah. And I wouldn't mind sitting down with him as well. So maybe you can share with them that it's not as big of a threat other than, getting logic to come in. And
exactly. And like I say, I keep pushing and I hope people are listening. I encourage people to ask questions. Questions.
What are the chances of a few months down the road when the campaigning for your spot comes up, we have another chat about what's going on?
Perfect.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Clarissa. It was a wonderful pleasure to sit down and actually have dialogue over these issues.
And I welcome any open conversation publicly, privately, at any time. Like I've mentioned before, whatever I speak is going to be the truth, and whatever I speak is going to be backed up by facts. I know that word hate was used in one of the conversations on Facebook. I do not hate. I do not believe in hate, but there is strong dislikes to corrupt politicians, which I am not a politician. I am a public servant, and to liars.
Well, I do hate, and the one thing that I hate the most is bullshit. And the moment I start smelling it, I start to hating real bad. So yeah, you come at me with bullshit, and I'm gonna call you on it. But that's about as bad as it gets. And at first, these are people that I went to school with. I can't go back. I can't unsee what I've already seen.
True.
So thank you.
Thank you again for having me, and hope for the best.